Okay, to get started, we're going to make some tracks here. Let's take this cube, press S to scale, G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, bring it over. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode. Then with the entire cube selected, I'm going to press D to duplicate it, middle mouse to constrain, and just bring it over across. And so, even though I duplicated the entire cube, it's just the mesh of the cube. We're still in edit mode here. And then so we want to press space for face selection and just select this inward face here facing towards this other one. Then I'm going to press Shift E to do an inset and bring this down. And this is going to be the size of the bar that crosses the tracks here. So I'll do it about something like this. And then I'm going to select this other face here and press Shift R, which repeats the last tool I used, which was this inset. Then we want to shift select this other face here and press F to bridge them. So next we want to shift select these faces here, press G to grab, and make them a bit longer. Something like this will probably be alright. Press Tab to go back into object mode. And now I'm going to press Shift D, which adds an array modifier, only we notice that when we press it, it's not going in the direction we want. And so to change that, we can adjust these offset values from 1 over here in the X to whatever it needs to be, or we can just press Alt-Shift-D. As soon as we add an array modifier with Shift-D, we can press Alt-Shift-D until we see the array going in the direction that we want. So we just, just basically wail on it till it does what you want it to do kind of mentality. And so there we go, we got that working. We can press Shift-D, you can actually just click or hold it and just keep adding to that array. So Shift-D adds an array modifier, and then tapping Shift-D again on that object after the array modifier has already been added increases the count. And you can use Alt-Shift-D to change the direction at any time. So right now wouldn't be a terrible time to go ahead and save this file. So I'm going to rename this object here roller coaster tracks, since that's what it's turning into. And then I'm going to click on my examples folder, but you can do this into anywhere in your library, or you can just save the old-fashioned way of going to File, Save As, and choosing a location. But I'm going into my examples folder. I'm going to click open my library assets button, and then I'm just going to press this down button, which will save any unsaved file we have open into whatever folder happens to be below. And so you can see here it's been saved as rollercoastertracks.blend because it uses whatever object you had selected as a file name. Of course, if you don't want that, you can just right click it and change the name to whatever. Be sure though that you do leave the .blend in the name. So say if I were to change this to something like Billy and then click like that, this is no longer a .blend file, so you do want to make sure that you leave the .blend in there. If you do decide to change the name of the file, make sure that after dropping it in here and renaming it, you just click and drag it back out into the 3D view to reopen it, and that will ensure that the new renamed file is saved over as what you renamed it whenever you go to File and Save or press Ctrl S or whatever. Okay, jolly good, done here, so click this to close the assets library up. Our tracks look alright right now, but if we were to say add a bevel modifier to these tracks like this, we'd notice something going on here, that where we would expect these tracks to actually meet, they're not actually meeting here. And so to get them to meet, what we can do is use this merge value in our array modifier. And I'll go ahead and close up this bevel modifier so it doesn't distract us. And so if we press merge, notice that these now become merged here. Only we're getting some weirdness going on. And we can control the distance at which the beginning and the end of basically the head and the tail of the object will merge. So that can help us figure out some of the problems there. But we have another problem going on here. If we press Alt and tap on my middle mouse button, which resets my view there, if we go inside of here, we can see something's going on that we don't really want. Where we would expect kind of the long steel part of this or whatever to be one interconnected piece, we can actually see that those faces, the end and the beginning of the object we made, are still there. And those pieces are trying to merge together, so it looks weird. So what we need to do is click this eye icon on this array modifier, which hides the visibility of this modifier's effect. So obviously it's an array modifier, so it makes an array of things. And so that's hiding its effect there. And what we need to do is get rid of the parts here as well as the back end here, so these all can join without messing up the mesh. So we'll press X to delete that, and then shift select these back two, press X to delete those. Now if we click this array modifier's eyeball icon to display its effect, notice the mesh isn't being weird. These are connecting properly and it looks good. So great. This bevel modifier would be awesome to have on when you're going to render this out. If you're going to render out some super sweet, cool animation or something, you may want to, toy with this, get these settings real high and looking nice and everything. But while we're working, since we're going to have a lot of these pieces, it's going to just end up eating too much resources. So what we'll do is we'll just hide its effect. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off smooth shading by pressing flat, so it's easier for us to work with here in the 3D view. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press S to scale these tracks down a bit because this is going to be getting quite a bit bigger. We have these tracks. We can make it as long or short as we want by controlling this count value, or we can just directly press Shift D to add more to that count value. So now what would be cool is if we could get this track to bend in the direction of a path or a curve. So we can actually very easily do that. All we need to do is first add a path or a curve, press Shift A, and under curve, let's go ahead and use the actual path. You can use a Bezier or circle or NURBS or anything, but I find the path is actually the easiest to control when you're trying to construct something like a roller coaster or train tracks or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and press my full screen button here so we have a little more screen real estate. I'm going to press 5 to go into top view. I'm going to press R to rotate this and hold Control to constrain it like this. Press Tab to go into edit mode, and G to grab, and we'll just go ahead and bring it where the track starts, although we're going to have to adjust it in a little bit. We can go ahead and have it go straight for a little bit, so we can press E to extrude that last point there in our path. And so far this path just looks basically like a regular line and edge inside any mesh object, but as soon as we press E to extrude and then move this over, we'll see that it actually is this NURBS curve that gets bent around according to the angles. However, we get these nice flat straight control points, which makes controlling this for us much easier. So I'm just pressing E to extrude and then middle mouse to constrain to get this to go in the directions that I want. So we'll have it go up a bit, maybe go over, and maybe just have it go up like that for now. So now we want these tracks to follow this curve. To do that's real easy. All we need to do is hop out of full screen mode there and click on our tracks object, and I'm going to go ahead and close up that array modifier for now because we're going to have to add a third modifier, which will get this object to bend to the direction of this path here. And so what we do is under add modifier, we want to use a curve modifier. And when we do, we see that nothing immediately happens. What we got to do is select a object. By object, it means a curve or a path or something. Since a few versions back in Blender, we have this super awesome feature where you can just click this eyedropper and select the object you want to use in the 3D view, which makes this kind of stuff so much easier. So we'll just click this, and we get this eyedropper, and then we get this nice little name show up over whichever object we want to select, which is very helpful. Click on that. So you can see that this looks like it's about following the direction that we would want it to, but if it wasn't, you could adjust these values here to try to get this to go in the direction you need it to. And so now if we press Shift D some more, we'll see as we increase this array modifier, it follows this curve line exactly how we want to, which is really awesome. So you may have noticed that the object, the track, is a bit off from the curve. You can adjust this real easily by either selecting the curve and moving it, so we could press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and we could put it to where it's in the dead center like this, or you can also move the object over to the curve. So either way, you can adjust that. So we'll go ahead and move the curve, try to make it to about dead center there, and that way we get more even distribution with the curving of this object as it goes around these corners and stuff. So that looks good. Looking at some of the places where this track is bending, I'm not loving so much how rigid the outside of these tracks are. If we were to click on our tracks, so we can see all our modifiers, and we turn on the visibility of the bevel modifier and give it smooth shading again, even then it still looks a little bit more rigid than I want it to. What's happening is this curve, this path here, is bending, and it's trying to bend the object along with it, but it doesn't really have enough mesh to work with to bend these really too smoothly. So we can fix this really easily just by adding some more edge loops to the core mesh object here. So if we hide the array modifier, we can see here's our actual object here. And if we press tab to go into edit mode, actually let's go ahead and shift scroll up for edge selection and then alt select this edge loop here and shift alt select to add to that loop selection here. Press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain. And really, I should have probably extruded these out rather than just, grabbing that bit out there. So let's take this and press E to extrude and then middle mouse to constrain after extruding that again. And maybe for the back here too, we'll alt shift select these, E to extrude, something like this, E to extrude again. And now with these loop cuts in here, this path has a lot more geometry to work with when trying to bend stuff. So if we turn on the visibility of the edge loop modifier, and we come back here, well, we've made it, for one, we've made it a lot shorter, so it's got less to work with. So we would need to press Shift D to add some more track parts to it there. And now we see we get a smoother result. So I think we could probably drop these segments though down a bit and maybe adjust this width a bit, although it's proven kind of hard to do because Blender's got to run through all of this array. So let's hide the effects of the array and just look at it here. And get this however we want it. Maybe we would want those back up at 4, maybe even a bit more. So let's turn on the visibility of the array modifier. Now we have a much smoother, nicer looking tracks when it comes time to render if we wanted to render this out as an image or an animation. Now that we know this will look good when we render out, let's go ahead and hide the visibility of the effect while we're in the 3D view. Notice the little camera icon in these modifiers too. When that's pressed, that means Blender knows to render it with these effects whenever you render the image or animation. So that's good that that's on even if we forget to turn that back on. And I'll go ahead and put a flat shading back on because it looks a little weird without the bevel or a subsurface modifier or something. Before we go any further, I thought it might be fun to bring in some assets that we created in previous tutorials. If you don't have these, you can get them at blendersensei.com/store and download them for free. And you don't have to use these objects. You can fill this in with whatever you want to create, but I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So here in my examples folder, I'm going to click open my library, and here's where I have all these files. So I'm going to bring in the draw mesh monkey bus that we created in that video and click that. So to append it, I'm just going to select it and press append, and that brings it into this area here. I'm going to press G to grab, and let's press 5 to go into top view, R to rotate, control to constrain, and I want it facing this way. Go ahead and add a ground here by adding a plane, press S to scale it out, make it bigger. I think I'm going to go ahead and under my builder options here, turn on high def shading, and this just makes it a bit easier to work with. And so if you activate this mode and you find it slowing down your computer too much, then you can just keep it off. So I'm going to press G to grab and bring this back here or something. I'll select the roller coaster tracks and I'll press Shift D a few times to get this at least to the length of the path here. Then we'll click back on the path, press tab to go into edit mode so we can, I don't know, maybe bring this around like here and E to extrude that out, middle mouse to constrain, and click back on the tracks, press Shift D a few times to increase that count. So we can see what that's looking like. Obviously that turn is a bit sharp there, so we would want to select one of these points and I press 1 to go into front view so I can kind of more easily control how I want this curve to look here. Something like that. Alt middle mouse to zoom in on my selection. Let's over here, let's press tab to go back into object mode. Let's bring in the sweet plate and dinnerware that we modeled in another one, and we'll click that, and to bring it into this scene here we just click it and then we press append. Now it's brought into our scene here. Let's scale it up, make it larger than life kind of thing. Press G to grab, middle mouse to bring it up a bit. There we go. Cool. All right, now we kind of have some stuff to work around. And let's see, do I want to bring in anything else? I'll go ahead and bring in this Techno Borg Suzanne head thing we made in the object from selection video. Select that, press append, and maybe bring this over here. Let's see, press 3 to go into right view. Maybe I'll have this thing Press R to rotate, just sitting on the ground real ominously. It'd be just a giant weird thing. R to rotate. Press 5 to go into top view. Maybe it'd be a little bit easier. Position this how we want. I don't know, something like that. Okay, so done with getting other files. So I'm going to close up my assets library. And let's finish up this track. So what do we want it to do? Let's select the track path. And let's press tab. And let's see. We could press E to extrude this down. G to grab. And press tab to go back into object mode. Select the tracks. Press Shift D. See how this is looking here. Click back on the Click on that last endpoint there. Let's see, press E to extrude, G to grab, bring this out like this. Let's go ahead and press 5 to go into top view, may make this a bit easier to see. Press Z to go into wireframe. I'm going to press B to do a border select, and I'm going to select all these and just kind of bring this out like this. I'm just going to press E to extrude this a bunch, and I think I want this to go through here like this. And come around through here. And we can of course edit these points to get this, rounder and looking better. All right, let's click back on the track, press Shift D a bunch. And especially when you've got this much stuff going on in your scene, you really want to make sure that the bevel modifier is off on these tracks, because these tracks are already creating a bunch of mesh. And with that bevel modifier on, it's just going to really weigh your scene down while you're trying to work in it. Just tap in Shift D here. Okay, let's click back on that path, tab to go into edit mode. Also, if you find that your computer's slowing down too much, you definitely don't have to use all of these assets. Maybe just import one of them and make something else. We'll press 5 to go into top view. Control this curve here. Proceed to extrude. It's not going the direction I want, so I'll rotate my camera a bit, press E to extrude, and then middle mouse to constrain. E to extrude again. Let's see what this is looking like. Tap Shift D a few more times. So what I'm going to have happen here is actually, I'm going to have this part of the track come and meet this other part of the track. So we can real easily make a segmented curve, a solid loop in the curve options. So what we do, if we press tab to go back in object mode with this curve selected, and we click on this little curve icon that will appear in your properties panel whenever you have a curve object selected. Let's click on that, and under active spline here, under cyclic, if we press this, this will join this into one solid loop. And so we can press tab to go into edit mode, press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain here. Because I'm going to want to, make this obviously a lot smoother. You don't want to run the track straight into the ground. So between here and this point, I'll press W and press subdivide. And this gives me another control point in the middle here. And when we first created this path, press Z to go into wireframe and B to do a border select. The path was created with a bunch of little segments here. We're definitely going to not need all these, so let's shift select these up until this last one here. Press X to delete those and press vertices. Now if we press Z to go back into solid viewport shading, we can see this will give us a much smoother re-entry here. All right, let's go ahead and click back on the track and finish it up so we can see what we're really working with. So we can either click on the track modifiers and under array increase this count manually, or we can just press Shift D a bunch and kind of watch it fill it up. And then right when you're at the end, you should be able to get these to join together by adding one that overlaps, and it should just merge in. Okay, so we've got our basic kind of track here. There's definitely some smoothing out we could do. So let's click back on the path, tab to go into edit mode, 5 to go into top view, and Let's go into wireframe, press Z. I'm going to go ahead and press my full screen button. A little more room to work with here. Just kind of try to get this to be a bit smoother. Maybe I can get rid of some of these points too, like between here and here. Press X to delete those. And deleting, some of those points allows us to create a little smoother angles. Press Z to go back into solid viewport shading. Another cool thing you could do to finish this off, you could go along and make like little posts and all sorts of little assets and things that could be like building this track up, increases the feel and the realism of it. You can also, move these objects around too. So here's a fun thing. We could maybe take this cup over here and scale it up real big. Press 5 to go into top view, R to rotate, and maybe make it to where you go through the loop of the mug handle. Select this plate, maybe make it a bit bigger to just go along better with the theme of everything being huge. And then we would want to click back on this path, tab to go into edit mode, shift select these points, G to grab, bring this up here. I'm going to press tab to go back into object mode, S to scale this plane out because it's getting a bit small here. I really don't want to spend too much time on this track, but at the same time, I hate to just leave it so floaty. So what I'm going to do is Alt right click over here, which temporarily disables cursor snapping, and press Shift A and add a cylinder shape, and then S to scale, G to grab. Maybe turn on smooth shading for this, just so there's some hint of supports for this track here. And then rather than duplicating this stand here, I'm just going to press Alt D and middle mouse to constrain. And this duplicates the object without duplicating the mesh, which helps us save resources when we're getting into a big file like this. And let's just press Alt D again. Bring these supports in a few places, maybe here. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. Just 5 to go into top view. Alt D again. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, something like this. 5 to go into top view. Alt D again. Bring this over here. I think that'll be our last one. And we could definitely, make these a lot cooler, build extra stuff around them, make them, look like they have bolts actually connecting to the tracks and stuff like that. But for now, it's pretty good. All right, so we got our tracks made and a little bit of a environment here. So let's go ahead and make a cart. So the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure that when we make this cart, the wheels are the same size as the track. So what I'm going to do is hold Alt and right click to drag my 3D cursor over here. And what Alt does is it temporarily disables 3D cursor snapping. So by default, if we just right click on something, the cursor will snap to that object's origin point. Or if we shift right click, of course, it will snap to whatever mesh point on that object. But if we hold Alt, it will disable it altogether, which sometimes we need. The point of that was to bring the cursor here so we can press Shift A and under mesh, add a cube. And we just want to make sure that this is slightly inside the width of the track. And I'm moving it down a little bit to get it to where it's an area where it's more straight. The track is more straight. So I can make sure that when I make these wheels for this cart, they will fit inside of the track. Okay? So now that we got our base kind of cube here, let's go ahead and move to this bottom layer down here, which you can see this little gray dot inside of it. The yellow dot, of course, is the layer that we're currently viewing. But this little bottom layer is specifically for keeping extra objects, groups, things that you want to make instances of or duplicates of and stuff. It's sort of like a kind of behind the scenes quick little area where you can work on stuff. So what we're going to do is move this cube to that little behind the scenes backstage area for us by pressing M to move to layer and then selecting that bottom layer. So you can see these set of boxes here correspond with these set. And so we moved the box to this bottom layer. Notice this bottom layer is now yellow, which means that the active object, the last selected object that is in that layer. So if we click to that layer, now we are over here with what's going to be our cart. Okay, so we had this box positioned over here because this is where those tracks were. But let's go ahead and bring it back to the center so it's a little more easier to work with. So I'm going to press Shift C to reset my 3D cursor to the center of the grid. Then I'm going to press T to bring up my tool shelf and press this handy button here, which will bring whatever objects you have selected to the 3D cursor. Let's go ahead and make a base for this. Press Shift A and I'm going to add another cube and I'm going to bring it up here. And I'm going to scale this down like this. I just want this to be available for a reference. So what we're going to do is make some boards. So I'm going to press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, S to scale, middle mouse to constrain like this. You grab, bring this down some. And I'm going to go ahead and press bevel to turn some bevel on here and adjust these values so this looks a little cleaner. And then I'm going to press Shift D because I want to make some boards going across this way. Only when I press Shift D, this did not quite go the direction that I wanted. So I'm going to bump this bevel below the array modifier too because that's where I want it. I could manually adjust these offset values here. So we could set this to 0 and figure out which direction we wanted this like this. But of course, the awesome way to do this is after adding an array modifier, you can change its direction by tapping on Alt-Shift D. So we can just press this until we find the direction we want, that's the direction I want. Then after that, I can just press Shift D to increase the count. So Alt-Shift D, after adding an array modifier, will change its direction, and then Shift D will increase the count. Of course, if we need to move that count back down, we can always just change it manually up here. So I want something, let's see, maybe about like this wide, that would be good. And I'm going to go ahead and press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. And maybe just a tad more distance here, so maybe that's too much, so negative 1.1, so maybe split the difference there, so negative 1.05. And that's going to give me just a little bit of distance between these floorboards and this cart that I think will look cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and apply this array modifier because it's done what I need it to do. And next I want to make two kind of trusses under here where my axles will go. Press tab to go into edit mode and press space for face selection and just select one of these faces. And then rather than having to model an entire other cube to get it shaped in the way I want, I'm just going to press Shift D to create an object from the mesh selection, which is also what duplicate will do if you're in edit mode. And then I'm just going to press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, G to grab, bring this over, S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, G to grab, bring this over something like this, maybe scale it down just a little bit more, E to extrude and bring it up. So I've got this object here. Even though I have only this board selected here, that its origin point is way over there, which I don't want. So under set origin, I'm going to press origin to object, and that'll just reset that for me to the object's center of mass, basically. Then I'm going to press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and drop this under because this thing's going to be going underneath all this. Next, we want to go ahead and add some axles where the wheels will go for our little base here. So I'm going to press 3 to go into right view and press Shift A, and under mesh, add a cylinder. And then I'm going to double tap space to bring up the operator menu and press align to view. Let's press S to scale that down. I'm also going to go ahead and go into full screen here so we have a little more space to work with. Then S to scale this out, G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and bring this up to the front. Maybe make it a bit smaller. And then bring it out like that. Of course, we don't want it too wide because this cube represents as far over as our wheels can go. So we want to keep that in mind as well. And I'm just going to press smooth to add smooth shading to this. Normally, I would be probably concerned about the ends of this cylinder shape here because they don't look that good. We would need to add a subsurface modifier and then adjust its mesh. But because wheels are going to be covering this up, I'm not too worried about it. But before we make the wheels, I think it would be nice if we kind of had something that was at least hinting to a piece of geometry that was holding the axle on to this bottom baseboard. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select this cylinder and press D to duplicate it. Right click to snap the duplicated object back to where it was duplicated from. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. So just kind of squeezing it down, press G to grab, move it up under here. What I'm going to do is just make kind of a brace thing for the axle. So let's press 3 to go into right view, and let's press tab to go into edit mode and Z to go into wireframe, so we can do a border select to select this bottom half of points down here. But let's press shift scroll down to make sure we are in vertex selection, B to do a border select. Now we got this bottom half selected. Let's press X to delete it, Z to go back into solid viewport shading. And so let's just press space for face selection, A to select all these. Then I'm just going to press E to extrude. Then maybe S to scale this out a bit, something like this. Press W a few times to give it some smoothing. Tab to go back into edit mode. Maybe E to extrude this out again. S to scale. Maybe add some loop cuts here. So click up under here and press Shift W and then scroll up twice and click that. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. Just so we've got some kind of brace thing here, and we could scroll that in a bit, and good. So I'm going to go ahead and press on my full screen button, and so this will render out at a nice 2 subdivision levels, which is good, because otherwise it would, render out like that, which is not good. But I'm just going to keep it down to 1, so it's not eating up so many resources as we're working with this stuff. That's something you always want to keep in mind when you are building a large scene like this. Is you want to make sure stuff will render out nicely, but you want to make sure it remains manageable as you're building it. Okay, so that's done. So I'm going to go ahead and press 1 to go into front view, and G to grab, move this over a little bit. Looks like it wasn't quite even, and D to duplicate and bring this over here. So we've got one on the other side there. So I'm going to go ahead and press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, and bring these in a little. And I'm going to shift select that bottom brace and that other bottom brace, all that. So if we press Z to go into wireframe, we can see what we've got selected there. And I'm going to press my manipulate center points only, so we can do a scale, which won't actually mess these up, but just bring them together. So if we press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, then this just brings them together without actually squishing them, which is nice. And so let's bring those in a little and click on the axle, and we'll go ahead and disable that so we can go back to squishing things when we scale, because it's what we want right now. S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, and bring those in just a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and make some wheels. So with our cylinder selected, which is basically our axle, let's press tab to go into edit mode, space for face selection. Let's select this end face here on this cylinder, press Shift E to create an object from selection, and press S to scale this out, and let's press E to extrude like this. Tab to go back into object mode, and so we've got a wheel here, but it looks a little rough, so we're going to go ahead and add some smoothing to it. So let's just press W to add a subsurface modifier, and press W again to bump up those levels. And so it looks a bit like a pie now, which is not what we want. So let's press tab to go into edit mode. And let's shift select both of these, this big pie face in the middle and this big pie face on the end, and press Control E, which will do an individual extrude, and this makes these look a lot better when we go into object mode. Although there's still a little bit of denting here, which we don't want to see, so we can hide those by pressing Control E to extrude those again, press S to scale, and drag these down. Let's press E again, S to scale. Then let's press space for face selection, and then C to do a circle select and select all the faces in here, and do the same thing on the other side. Let's paint all these faces here, make sure we got all those. Then S to scale, middle mouse to constrain. Let's select all these faces on this outer side here. Press E to extrude, bring those in, E to extrude again. And so now we have this nice kind of a simple wheel here. So we definitely want this wheel to look this smooth and nice when this thing renders, if we were to ever render this animation or whatever. But we want to drop these levels down to about 1 while we're working in the scene, so it doesn't eat up too much resources. And then what we want to do is press Alt-D to duplicate this object, but use the same mesh as the object it came from, which helps us conserve resources. Also, incidentally, it's really helpful that any change we make to the duplicated objects mesh will affect the original and vice versa. So I'll then right click to snap that back to where it was duplicated from, G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, bring it out this way. And so we need this to flip around, so let's press the X button on our mirror, and this should mirror this in the direction we need. So let's push G to grab, let's press 1 to go into front view, and make sure that this is positioned properly here. There we go. All right, cool, that's looking good. So I think I'm going to try to attach these bottom truss pieces here to the main wood board. So let's shift select both of these, then shift select that. We can tap Z to make sure we've got everything selected we want, and then press join, and this joins those all into a solid piece. Now what we want to do is duplicate all this back stuff here. So we'll just shift select all these. And so there's what we got selected there. And once again, we just want to press Alt D to duplicate these rather than D, so we can use the same mesh and just bring these up. So using Alt D rather than D when you're in object mode to duplicate stuff is useful because it conserves resources. Also, if you've got something like this wheel and you make one change to it, in one place, say I did something like this, press E to extrude, press tab to go back into object mode. This has all been repeated on all these. This isn't the same for like the modifiers or materials or things on top of the object itself you're using. You can still use individual modifiers and modifier settings, individual materials and all that. The Alt D trick just basically will use the same mesh, that is the stuff that we edit when we're in edit mode. So it's good to know about that, and we see that effect happen as soon as we hop back into object mode there. So now that we've got our wheels pretty much figured out, we can go ahead and get rid of this bottom board we were using as kind of a ruler. Press X to delete that. And once again, rather than double right clicking to add a new object or pressing Shift A to add a new object, I much rather prefer using the mesh from other objects to generate new objects, sort of like the way cells organically grow off of other cells. So let's press tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to select one of these faces and press Shift D to create an object from selection. And then let's press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, G to grab, bring this up some, S to scale like this. Let's press E to extrude this up like this. Let's select this face, shift select this face, press Control E to do an individual extrude and bring these out a little bit. And we'll select these two faces. Press E to extrude to about right here. Maybe we'll leave a space open where you can actually get into the cart. To do that, here in edit mode, we'll just press D to duplicate these. Pressing D rather than Shift D while in edit mode duplicates these, but it's not a new object. It's still the same mesh within the same object. So let's shift select these and E to extrude these out. And we'll E to extrude that there. And then select this, shift select this, press F to bridge those. And let's go ahead and make a little seat in here. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift E to do an inset here. And then select this other side and press Shift R, which will do the same exact inset there. Shift select the other face there so I can scale these at the same time, middle mouse to constrain. Then press F to join those together. So now we've got a little bit of a seat there. And let's see, let's go ahead and select this face and shift select this face. E to extrude this up, E to extrude again. And let's select these two faces, press F to bridge those. Then let's shift select all this, E to extrude out, and maybe it's kind of like a little cover, a very short cover. Maybe it should be a bit taller. Let's shift scroll down for vertex selection, Z to go into wireframe, B to do a border select, select all that business. And let's just bring this up to where as tall as this would need to be for someone to sit in it. Okay, I imagine something like that would do. Let's press tab to go back into object mode. So I really like these kind of bottom boards here. So to show those off a bit more, I'm going to press S to scale, middle mouse to constrain, and kind of bring this in a little bit just so it looks a little more rustic, with these kind of sticking out like that, which I think is kind of cool. Then I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode and select a few of these faces and press Shift E to do an inset, E to extrude inside, just to give this a little more character here and there. and maybe extrude this out a bit. Okay, so our cart's complete. It is after I add one more detail. There we go, cool. Okay, so we've got our cart finished here. I would recommend go ahead and save this. So if you already have it saved, you can just press Control S, then you'll get this message and click it, and that will save over it. Okay, we should probably do a little bit of cleanup before we bring our cart over into our big scene over here. And by that, I mean parenting things that need to be parented and naming important stuff. This big chunk of the cart here, this is the main part of the cart that we'll probably be grabbing or clicking on the most. So let's go ahead and rename this to just cart. So that's real easy there. And then what we want to do is get everything else parented to the cart object. But before we do that, there's something I need to point out. Notice that the little orange dot, that's the origin point of this cube object. So if I click on these different objects, you can see their own origin points. Notice that it's like way up in the front. We actually want this to be more in the center because this is going to be the main object that we get to follow the path. And the way you get the object to follow the path the best without, like, you know, its back end like sliding real far off the edge or something is to have that object's origin point in the center. To do that, what we're actually going to do is press 5 to go into top view and press tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and then we're just going to manually move the whole mesh around where we think that the origin point would be, which is going to be near the bottom and in the center like this. In this way, we can precisely put the origin point where we want by moving the whole mesh around it. And this is going to give us a tighter control with this object going around the path. So that's good. So let's press tab to go back into object mode, 4 to go into left view, and G to grab. And let's just bring this back to where it's sitting nice on top of here. Okay, that will work out a lot better. So let's press A to select everything else, then shift select the cart, which deselected it. So let's shift select it again. The point being everything that you want parented to the cart selected, and then finally the object that you're making the parent needs to be highlighted. In Blender, that means the active object, so we shift select that. Now let's press parent. Okay, so this cart object, this is the parent, and we see here, if we press the little plus sign in the outliner, all these other objects and things are parented under our cart. So here's our main cart. And if we want to move, scale, rotate it, whatever, we can just select it by the cart. And all the other objects will follow as they are directed because they are the child objects. We're about ready to bring this into our main scene. So let's press A to select all this stuff. So let's press M, select that. That gets us moved. Now we're over to the main layer. Here's our car back here. Let's press G to grab middle mouse to constrain and bring it up near our tracks here. So I had a bit of a crash here, and when I opened Blender back up, I noticed that the track was doing this super weird thing, which I'm not sure why it's doing that. But if you click on the path and press tab to go into edit mode to be able to edit, then press tab to go back into object mode, it seems to correct it if that weird thing is happening. Maybe it's just because the scene's starting to get a bit complicated, not sure. I also did a little work on these tracks off camera. They looked a bit big in comparison to the actual cart, so I'll show you what I did. If we click on the tracks itself and I press tab to go into edit mode, I'll go ahead and double tap tab to hide everything else and press alt middle mouse to zoom in. What I did was just add 2 loop cuts here by pressing Shift W and then scrolling up to add 2, and then I just dropped them down to give this a bit of an indentation. And then I added 2 loop cuts here and brought them over to the side to pull that in. And this just gives a little more appearance of actual rails. And I had to also decrease the distance because it was up a bit higher, but it was making things look messed up after I adjusted the mesh. So I just had to decrease the merge distance a little bit there until that all got to working. So I'll double tap tab to get out of quick hide mode and press tab to go back into object mode where we can see the effects of the track. So once again, if the actual tracks start looking weird, just click on the path itself and then press tab to go into edit mode and then back into object mode, and that seems to fix that. Additionally, I think the high def shading mode we're in, which looks really cool right now, may be causing some of the crashes. So let's press T and let's go ahead and disable that for now. If you're not having trouble, then don't worry about it, but I'm gonna disable that right now. Maybe because I'm running screen capture software simultaneously and it's all just maybe a bit too much. If we click back on our cart here, so to get our cart to follow these tracks, it's super easy. All we need to do is get the actual cart piece to follow the path, and since these boards and the wheels and everything else is all parented to this object, then they'll just do whatever this object does. So these objects don't actually need to be following this path, just the core cart here. And then all these, in the same way when we press G to grab or rotate or whatever, they'll follow it in the same way. So all we need to do is select the big part of the cart, then shift select the path. And if you're having trouble selecting the path here, you can just come down here in the outliner, and we just left that name NURBS path, so you can just shift select it there if you're having trouble shift selecting it there, because you have to have just the cart selected, then shift select the path. Then if we press follow, we'll see the cart now following the path. So if we press play, there it goes. Now it's moving in the wrong direction, which is not what we want, so we'll have to adjust that. Also, it's a bit lower than we want, but no worries. We can always manually adjust this, and then it will follow in the way that we want. So let's just select the actual cart, press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain. Let's press 5 to go into top view here, Z to go into wireframe, R to rotate. And let's see, let's press Z to go back into solid viewport shading. We can actually rotate this a bit, and I find that actually using the rotate widget in situations where you need to make a lot of minute rotations to basically create an offset is what you're doing here. This little widget can actually be helpful. So to have that active, you just press this button and then just make sure the little rotate bit is the one actually highlighted there. And then we can just, precisely move this stuff. All right, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and disable that thing, turn it off. Now, if we press play, we'll see our cart following our track very nicely. Here it comes for the loop-de-loop and back to the finish. Very good. 4 seconds is kind of short for this. Let's go ahead and right-click to get our cursor back to 0. And we're going to scale this out to be 3 times this, so that would be 12 seconds. So let's press S and then enter 3. So S is for scale, and then 3 means, okay, scale it 3 times that, which is what we want. Click to enter. And now the animation will take a bit longer. Notice here my frame rate is only at about 9 or 8 frames per second, which means this animation is going to look a lot faster when it actually plays. So always keep that in mind. I'll press pause and go back here. Okay, so we awesomely have this cart following the track, but it would be super cool if we could get some more carts behind it. So to do that, we're just going to need to select all of the carts. So I'm going to press Z to go into wireframe and hold C to bring up my circle selection brush, which just lets me paint a selection, which is really nice. We want to make sure we don't select the path or the track or anything, and just all the assets belonging to the cart are selected. So if I press Z, I can see that, yeah, that's just cart stuff. We got the whole cart selected there. And then once again, rather than pressing D to duplicate this, which creates a whole new data block for the mesh, which we don't need, we just need an instance of it basically. Let's press Alt D. And this creates us an instance, and then after pressing Alt D, right click or escape, and that will move the new duplicated object exactly to the location of where it was duplicated from. And so you should see in our outliner we've got cart and then cart.001. And what we want to do is actually do this 2 more times so that we'll have 4 carts. So I'm going to press Alt D again, then right click. You can see now I have this cart.001, cart.002. Let's do it 1 more time, press Alt D, right click. So we've got these 4 carts all sitting exactly on top of each other right now. And if we press play, they'll actually all move together too, so that's good. The only difference we need to make is an offset in the constraint modifier that is on these carts, which actually cause them to follow the path. So let's start by clicking the cart.001. This will be the cart directly after the first cart, which is just called cart. And then we want to click on our constraint tab. And here's this offset value, so we just bring it back a little bit, however far we want. Now, depending on how wild you made your paths, how sharp the curves are, you'll find that these will be running into each other if you have them too close, so just keep that in mind. So we'll click on the next one. We want to adjust its offset value. and click on the last one there and adjust its offset value, put it at the dead last there. Let's press play and check it out. Now it's moving super slow. We're only at 9 frames per second, but the awesome thing is that this is working and going amazingly on these tracks as we kind of follow this around on its super cool journey. You can, of course, after you have this all set up, continue to edit these tracks. You can add new points or rearrange them, and all the tracks will follow. You may have to increase the count to the array modifier that creates the tracks. But that's about it, and you can play with this and have as much fun as you want, changing stuff around, adding stuff, increasing the speed or decreasing it, whatever. So up until now, our camera has sort of just been sitting still here, but there's a couple of neat things we could do with this. So first of all, we could get the camera to actually follow this path too. All we do is click on the path, and we can see animation path is selected there. Then under camera, press follow path, and there we see the camera. If we press play, we see it moving, only it's right inside of the path on the tracks. So what we would want to do is adjust it. So let's click it, press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain. We could bring it to the front or the middle or wherever. We could use our rotation widget to rotate it. That's one thing I want to point out. You can manually move your camera or rotate it, whatever, after you have it following a path. However, if you try to come down in the camera view after using follow path, like rotate or something, it will go crazy. If you forget and accidentally do that, you can always press reset path and it will bring the camera back to the original location. But you'll need to use the widget and stuff like that when you have follow path selected. Now, when you're just using track selected, you can, manually move the camera around and it's fine. But when you have the camera following a path, if you forget and try to zoom or do something in here, it'll go screwy and you'll need to press reset path. Okay, so then we could either press play here or press play here. The play and back buttons here, of course, are just, for convenience for our little camera controls, but they do the same thing as pressing play here. Sweet. So we have our camera following the tracks, only it seems a bit ADD because it's not really following the rest of the tracks. So to fix that, we just go back, stop and back on our animation. We can pick an item we want to follow, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off that rotation widget because it's annoying most of the time. And we could press camera, track selected, and so now the camera will follow the path and track the front car because that's what we have selected. So we'll see that down here. Very super cool. Now that's really fun to watch. Whee! Awesome. Here they come for the loop-to-loop. Oh, coming down. Nice. I'm in Blender Render mode. If you're in Blender Render, you'll see this ambient option available. Let's click that. And let's also go ahead. I'm going to press focus selected, which will allow us to have some depth of field effects, both in our camera view here and if we were to render. And so another thing we can do with the camera is rather than having it follow this path, is we could have it follow another path. Like say we could have it following a circle going around the whole thing and then tracking the actual roller coaster itself. But one thing I found that was really cool is we can duplicate this original track path. And then if we were to say scale it inward a bit, and we could go ahead and rename it so it's not confusing. We'll call this animation camera path. And then what we could do is with that path selected under camera, we could press follow path. And now the camera will be following this path that's scaled in a bit. And so if we press play, it's still tracking that front car, and we have these sweet ambient occlusion and depth of field effects. So this is looking really, really cool. And so you see we have got some problems here. So the camera path actually runs through this head and all this stuff. So there's some things we would want to adjust there. So we would just press tab to go into edit mode. Since it's a camera path, you always want a really smooth camera path. So we could get rid of some of these vertex points. And then we would want to make sure that this path isn't running into stuff like that big giant cyborg Suzanne head. Now it looks like, if we press tab to go back into object mode, it looks like we're not running into anything. Also, we could go ahead and slow this camera and path animation down a bit, say maybe 2 or 3 seconds, so it'll be lagging behind a little, and that'll look really cool. To do that, we can just grab this last point here. We could right click to get this to snap to say 14 seconds, press G to grab, click near there and it will snap. Press back. I'm going to press my tilde key down here in my camera view to maximize the screen and press play. And let's just watch this play out. Well, that about does it for this video. I know it's been a long one, but we learned an incredible amount of stuff and we learned how to do incredibly amazing stuff. So I hope you're able to put all this information and tools to good use and just make something amazing. So stay tuned for more, and thanks for watching.